All right, let's get right into it. We're going to unravel one of the biggest financial mysteries of our time. It's a story that involves trillions of dollars that basically appeared out of thin air, and more importantly, what that means for every single one of us.
So let's set the scene. The year is 2020. I mean, you remember it. The world just stopped. Businesses were closing their doors. Millions of people were losing their jobs. It really felt like the global economy was teetering on the edge of a cliff. And then something really, really strange happened. Poof, just like that, trillions and trillions of new dollars flooded into the financial system. The stock market, which had been in an absolute freefall, suddenly reversed course and started soaring.
So that's the big question, isn't it? Where did all of this money actually come from? Because when you figure out the answer, it reveals something kind of unsettling about the way our whole economic system actually works.
You see, this wasn't money from people working harder, or the government collecting more taxes, or from some giant national savings account. No, it was just created. It was brought into existence. Which just begs the question, how is that even possible?
To really get our heads around this, we're going to start with a really simple analogy, but trust me, it's a powerful way to understand the core of what's really going on here.
Just imagine that for a second. You have a machine, maybe down in your basement, that can print perfect 100% legal money. Sounds amazing, right? It seems like the ultimate solution to any problem you could ever have.
Your bills are due? No problem, just print some cash. You've got debt? Print it away. Seems perfect, but what's the catch? What would happen if everybody gets one of these machines? If we can all create unlimited amounts of money, does it have any value anymore? Of course not. It's basically worthless, and that is the core paradox. Okay, so let's pull back the curtain and look at how this process works in the real world. Because, it's obviously a bit more complicated than a machine in your house, but the underlying principle is shockingly similar.
So forget that cartoon image of a giant printing press spitting out dollar bills. That's not really how it happens. It's actually a really sophisticated system, kind of a partnership between two incredibly powerful players, the US government and the country's central bank, the Federal Reserve.
Here's how it goes down in 4 basic steps. First, the government decides to spend a whole lot of money it doesn't actually have, from taxes. Think stimulus checks or industry bailouts. Step 2, to get that cash, it issues treasury bonds. You can think of these as just official government IOUs. Now here's the magic trick, step 3. The Federal Reserve steps in and buys up those bonds. And this is the most important part. How does the Fed pay for them? Step 4. It creates brand new digital money literally out of thin air, just with a few keyboard strokes. That new money then gets pumped into the banking system, and from there, it flows out into the whole economy. And this whole dance has a very official-sounding name. It's called monetary policy. It's the tools central banks use to make sure markets are stable and the economy keeps humming along. And for a long time, it seems like a perfect solution. But there's always a but. See, here's where the story takes a turn. The problem is, once you start using this powerful tool to fix every problem, the system can get, dependent on it. It pretty much becomes an addiction. One of the sources we looked at for this explainer puts it perfectly. The economy becomes like a patient who's hooked up to financial life support. Yeah, the machine is keeping them alive, but they can't survive on their own anymore. Just think about it. Ever since the financial crisis in 2008, and especially since 2020, every time there's a hint of trouble, what's the solution? The market starts to tank? Create money. The economy looks like it's slowing down? Create more money. It's a fantastic short-term fix. It totally stops the panic. But over time, it creates a much bigger, much more dangerous problem down the road. And that brings us right up to today. We're now dealing with the consequences of that addiction. And we've kind of backed ourselves into a corner. We're in a trap, and there's no easy way out.
So here's the dilemma. After creating all those trillions of dollars, we now have way more money chasing the same amount of stuff, which, as you know, is the classic recipe for inflation. So the Fed is left with 2 terrible choices. Option 1, they can keep creating money to prop up the markets, but that will almost certainly make inflation even worse. Or option 2, they can stop creating money, which could cause the markets to fall, the economy to slow, and maybe even trigger a recession. You see the problem? Print and you get inflation. Stop and you get a recession. It's a lose-lose.
And that's the big twist in this whole story. The very tool that was used to save the system again and again has now become the very trap that's endangering it. There are no good options left on the table.
Now look, this isn't just some abstract economic theory that only matters to bankers and politicians. This trap has very, very real consequences for all of us.
It quietly changes our day-to-day financial reality.
Here's how you probably feel it. The money you've worked hard to save in your bank account, it buys a little bit less every single year. The value of every dollar you earn is slowly being chipped away by inflation. Your cost of living, groceries, rent, gas, it just keeps climbing. And it leads to that feeling that so many of us have, that you're running faster and faster on the treadmill, but you're just not getting ahead.
And this has a massive effect on society as a whole. Because all this new money has to go somewhere, it tends to pump up the value of assets, things like stocks and real estate. And those prices rise way faster than most people's paychecks. So if you already own assets, you get wealthier. But if you rely on a salary, it gets harder and harder to keep up. And this just quietly widens the gap between the rich and everybody else. Which brings us to the final, and maybe most uncomfortable truth in this entire situation. At this point, it's not really a choice anymore. It's become a necessity. The hard reality is that our economic system and the national debt have gotten so enormous that just hitting the brakes isn't a viable option. If they stop the flow of new money cold, it could trigger a catastrophic collapse. So the system is forced to do the only thing it can, just keep going and try to manage the fallout as best it can. And that really leaves us with the big lingering question for our future. If the very thing keeping our economy afloat is also the thing that's slowly hollowing it out from the inside, what happens next? What happens when the cure is the disease?